is the highest factor in the DISC graph. So for Peter, it's high dominance, and for Susan, it's high steadiness. If all else fails, as long as you can recognize the highest factor in the profile, you have a load of information to understand the individual. So all those things we've just reviewed, the intent, the focus, the communication style, the questions, the motivators, the fears, the leadership style, we get all of those out of the high factors. And you can go back to your training manual or ask your consultant if you want some further help or summary with that. In the Thomas language, we talk about connects and we talk about disconnects. Connects are factors where one individual has the same high or low factor as another individual. So when you look at Peter and Susan, you can see that they have no factors that connect. Peter has high D, Susan has low D. Peter has low S, Susan has high S, and so on. This generally tends to alert us, if we have no areas of connect, that we may not have anything in common. And unless there's really strong value for the other individual, we may have some communication issues. Areas of disconnect are areas where we have a disconnect, where we don't share a factor. And so you can see with Peter and Susan, they have 4 areas of disconnect. This sometimes makes us feel that the other individual is from another planet. So the rule around areas of connect, we have natural compatibility where we connect, except the high D where we may have power struggles. The rules around the disconnecting factors are that we may have natural incompatibility initially, but if we value each other, we can really turn this into something very powerful. And that brings us to the next terminology, which is blind spots. Blind spots are things that we're not quite aware of that relate to our factors. So the high D Peter may not realize in his need to tell people are seeing him as too dictatorial. In Susan's case, her need to listen, people may see her as a pushover. These are blind spots. So associated with each behavior are strengths and then also areas of challenge or blind spots. And those leaders who are highly self-aware make it a life work to work on their blind spots. We've talked about power struggles. Power struggles come into play based on hierarchy of power. So if a vice president is a high D and his or her director is a high D, the vice president has more power. They both have high Ds, but there's going to be more of a power slant towards the vice president. When people are peers and we have high Ds, we are likely to get jostling for power. They want to be right, and they're going to challenge each other. Flexing factors really refers to agility, and we teach this around leadership. Leadership agility is a leader's ability to flex or modify his or her own behavior to get the best out of the situation. Now, you may be looking at Peter and Susan and saying, well, what's the problem? Peter's a high D, he's telling. Susan's a high S, she's listening. Hey, sounds like a match made in heaven. Remember what we said earlier. One-way communication doesn't count as communication. So when Peter's sending a message to Susan, he can tell or direct, but then he needs to stop and ask. So Susan, what do you think? Or Susan, what other ideas do you have to ensure that there's two-way communication going on? Now we're going to test our knowledge, and we've got several poll questions for you to spice up the afternoon and let you participate. So I think we've got about 4 different poll questions, and then we'll wrap up with the coaching conversation with some really neat resources for you. So take a minute to look at Peter and John. This is their graph 3 profiles. You have to identify the 2 most likely challenges when Peter and John are communicating. This means you have to consider both their profiles, and you have to consider A through E, which are the 2 that are most likely to be challenges. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to determine your answers. Remember, you need to choose 2 answers, and when we open the polls, you'll be able to cast your vote for your 2 most likely challenges. 10 seconds, and we're going to open the poll for this question. Okay, so let's see how we did. The absolute best answers are B and E, making assumptions and being challenging and impatient. So those are the very best answers. We can see that challenging and impatient, everybody got that, because with the high D, the high I, the low S, the low C, you've got 4 active behaviors. The S is energizing the D and creating more drive and energy, which is going to create this fast-paced, impatient approach. Making assumptions comes out of both individuals not listening, preferring to tell rather than to listen. They also have a low C, so they're not taking notes and really not paying attention. Pretty selective learning. Some of you said providing too many details. That is not a correct answer for challenges because they both have a low C, and so they're likely to keep communication broad and often forget details. So well done. I think the majority of you did extremely well. Let's move on to discovering more about communication. And this time we are dealing with Maria and John. Maria is a manager and John is her direct report. This question is about what Maria can do in terms of modifying or flexing to better respect John's style and engage and motivate John. So if you were coaching Maria, what 2 items would you be coaching her about to get the very best out of engaging and communicating with John? Let's take 30 seconds to have a look, and then we'll open our polls. Ten seconds, and we're going to open our poll for this question.